thanking Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on this holiday to remember the civil rights leader's birthday. Even the state Republican Party tweeting out a reference to Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail and the moral and theological tradition to defend opposition to unjust laws. That's what they tweeted out earlier today. Well, that MLK Living Legacy celebration that Andrew just told us about at Boise State University, that continues tonight with a conversation with Dr. Ibram X. Kendi. He's an historian, anti-racist scholar, and the author of 6 books, including How to Be an Anti-Racist. It's a book that put the Boston University professor at the center of critical race theory discussions in Idaho's legislature for the last couple of years. In fact, the state passed a law in 2021 to ban CRT teaching in Idaho schools. Dr. Kendi has heard this about Idaho. He's also heard about our mountains. He's familiar with our blue turf and our racial demographics, which is why he told me today it's important for him to be here.
I think it's important even for white Americans, and of course, white people make up the vast majority of people in Idaho, to recognize the ways in which racism, including anti-Black racism, is actually in the end harming them too. And I think that's one of the most exciting and tragic revelations that scholars of racism have been demonstrating through research and science over the last few years, just how harmful racism is to us all.
Tonight, what should people expect?
I'm hopeful that we'll be able to talk about who Dr. King actually was, what he actually stood for. We'll also be able to talk about American politics and how in too many cases we have elected officials and even intellectuals who are misrepresenting King, just as they're misrepresenting those of us who are striving for racial justice. And part of the reason why they're misrepresenting King and they're misrepresenting those of us who are striving for racial justice is to tell the truth about what we stand for, is to tell the truth that we don't stand for their policies.
You've talked about this before, this misappropriation of Martin Luther King Jr.'s speeches, especially those 35 words in the I Have a Dream speech that people tend to just throw out there as like, we believe the same stuff as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Today, in the Idaho State House.
It's kind of auspicious that today is Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, and his purpose was, and he spent 13 years advancing the civil rights of people based on certain characteristics. And this does the same thing. It seeks to advance civil rights based on certain characteristics.
This appropriation of Martin Luther King's words to promote a cause that doesn't really seem to apply to that. What do you think about that?
I think it's a double tragedy. And so, of course, King was assassinated on April 4th, 1968. And unfortunately, ever since, he has been assassinated a second time by people who are literally killing his legacy, a person who was committed to human rights and civil rights and equality and justice for women. He was, of course, a champion of reproductive rights, just as he was a champion of anti-racism. But of course, people are killing that legacy, and I think it's indicative of the second assassination of MLK.
Dr. Kendi said he didn't specifically decide he needed to come to Idaho because our lawmakers wanted to fearmonger away from teaching about racism, pointing to his work as divisive. But he believes it's important for him and scholars like him who study racism to go to places and spaces where they're not even expected to be. Dr. Kendi's conversation begins tonight at 6 in the Jordan Ballroom upstairs in Boise State's Student Union building. I'm told it is filling up quickly. It is free and open to the public, but as I said, that seating is limited.